Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Yeah, hi, Kevin.
Morning.
Morning.
So I think I think we might be waiting on one or two other folks. So we'll give them a minute or two and then we'll jump right in. All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. I know we may have one or two other folks that may be joining us a little bit later, but we'll go ahead and jump right in the interest of time. But just want to uh, actually, I'll stop and I'll turn it over to Kevin to kind of call the meeting into order, and then I'll jump into a quick welcome here.
Yep, thanks everyone. Um, so so hey, thanks for making time to be here today this morning and your commitment to boys lacrosse across the state. This committee plays a critical role in shaping the direction of our sport, and your experience and your perspective is essential to providing the best possible experience for our students and our coaches and our schools. So with that, I'd like to call the meeting to order and do a roll call. And Aaron, do you want to do the roll call, or Colette, or myself?
Kevin, I'll let you roll with the roll call if you're okay with that.
Okay. So let's just go around the room, and if you could just introduce yourself and say your name and your role and school if you're associated with a school or a school district or organization. So I'm Kevin Benji. I'm the Director of Athletics for Denver Public Schools. And I'll just go across my screen here. Ron.
Ron Alexander from Academy District 20. I'm the Director for Athletics and Activities here.
Rod Allison.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Kevin. I'm Rod Allison. I'm with the Boys High School Lacrosse Coaches Association.
Rod, good to see you. Ron, good to see you. Chris Telluride.
Yep, I'm Chris Murray. I'm gonna tell you right. I'm jumping in and filling out Bobby's term after he moved on.
Good to see you, Chris. Aaron.
Good to see everybody this morning. Aaron Dunn, Assistant Commissioner with CHSAA. New to the CHSAA team, this being my first year, but I'm a Colorado native. I was a student athlete here in the state of Colorado, so product of CHSAA, and excited to get to work with each and every one of you all. Oversee boys lacrosse as well as girls lacrosse, ice hockey, field hockey, flag football, and boys and girls soccer. So we'll see a lot of you in many different sports and areas throughout the state of Colorado, but I really appreciate you taking the time and all the effort that you put into our boys lacrosse. So look forward to working with everyone.
Nice. Scott Gettleman.
Morning, everybody. Scott Geldelman. I'm with the Officials Association. I'm the RMLOA Secretary Treasurer and also one of the lead trainers. And again, just appreciate everybody including us in the meeting and look forward to collaborating with everybody throughout the season.
Good to see you. Colette.
Colette Stone, coordinator of sport here. I get to work with Aaron, and this is my third year going into Voice Lacrosse here at CHSAA.
Good to see you. And I think that's everybody. Did I miss anybody?
I think that's it, Kevin. I know Chad is traveling with Spirit today, so he's not able to join us, but he's another one of our wonderful committee members. And then we've got two of our other committee members who will hopefully either be joining us a little bit later, in terms of Eric and Logan. So hopefully we'll be able to have them join us here soon.
Great. Aaron, did you want to continue with the welcome?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of, first of all, as I said before, I appreciate everybody taking their time to join us this morning. Our original intent was to do it in person, but I know with schedules and things like that, it's a little bit challenging to do that. So I thank you all for your time. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to get together here in person. But really looking forward to working with this group. Obviously, this being my first year working with boys lacrosse here in the state of Colorado, I've heard tremendous things. Obviously, it's a great sport. We've got great support, great administrators, great coaches. So really looking forward to working with everybody, but also looking forward to understanding, where we're at in terms of areas of growth, what we do well, and then what our thoughts are in terms of the future of supporting boys lacrosse throughout the state of Colorado. So, we've got our agenda here that we'll talk through, but please know outside of the committee, anytime you have questions, feedback, thoughts about boys lacrosse, that's obviously an open invitation to reach out with any of those questions or suggestions. So with that, Kevin, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Thanks, Aaron. So we should probably do a review of the minutes from last year and then approval of the minutes.
Let's see. I'm not sure if we have them from last year. Let me check and see if we have those, Kevin. I don't
Okay.
think. Yeah, we do not have those.
Okay. Well, all in favor? Let's take a look at the agenda. Anything that we need to add to the agenda before we approve the agenda? I just had one thing. I don't know if anybody has any expertise on this. This occurred to me this morning. There's been conversation about the lacrosse shot clock. I know it's a pilot, not near ready to be official yet, but if anybody has any information on that and how it's going, I'd be curious to hear about it.
This is Rod. I don't have any specific information, Kevin, but I'm glad you brought that up. There has been a fair amount of discussion amongst coaches, nothing in an organized fashion, about the necessity of a shot clock, and some debate on that. I suppose it's not. It hadn't. I haven't heard a lot of debate. It's been that we need to go that route to stay current with the game. So if you're saying that something's going on with the implementation, I suppose that's good news. And we'll follow that and try to find out more from you or whoever as to what's going on. I was going to bring it up just as a side note to either this committee or to Aaron at a later date, like, what's the process? And what can we do to help facilitate somebody taking a look at it to see if it's practical and something that we might or should do here in Colorado.
Okay, let's just add that as a bullet point under. I don't know if we can create a new bullet point for that, and we can.
Yeah, Kevin, we can do that. We can create a new bullet point for that. I guess we could just call it additional agenda items, and then we'll call it shot clock, and we can talk a little bit further about that. And I won't spend too much time right now, but it did come up in discussion during our girls lacrosse committee meeting, so we can kind of share a little bit of what was discussed there, and then kind of talk about some feedback that we got from NFHS as well. So that's a great discussion item to add to the agenda. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay. Any other discussion topics? All right. We need two motions for the approval of the agenda. Can I get the first motion?
Motion.
Was that Chris? Okay. Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second by Ron.
All right. Thanks, Ron. All right. Agenda approved. Let's turn it over to Scott. And I'm not sure if Mark is here. I didn't see Mark, but Scott Gettleman, take it away. Officials report.
Thank you so much. Just real quick on the shot clock, throughout the various summer tournaments and things like that, some of the tournament organizers do use a shot clock. I think it's probably a beneficial item to, certainly consider in Colorado. I know there's a bunch of different states that are piloting it. So, it's certainly something to think about. And, we as officials have certainly utilized it. I'm sure some of the players have also become familiar with it as part of the game. So that's certainly something to consider. I'm glad that y'all have added it to the agenda as well. From the officials' perspective, we're in the throes of registration and training. Last year we had a record number of officials. There was 123. So far we've got 97. We've had quite a number of attritions due to people taking jobs out of state, folks that have aged out. So we definitely need to continue to promote the recruitment efforts. The average age of our association is 56 years old, and that's not good. We need to get younger guys. I'm certainly not getting any younger, and we've really got to get some new blood. I think we have about 6 or 7 new officials, which is good. We still need to continue those efforts. So to the extent that you can work with your coaches to talk about officiating, whether it's in Colorado or not, we really don't care. Some of these guys that played in high school now are in college. There's certainly opportunities for them, and a lot of times after college they'll come back. So that's certainly something that we need to keep in the forefront is recruitment, because if we continue not to recruit as fast as we're losing people, that's not good. And there's a ton of games this year, as you all know. What really helps us out from a scheduling perspective is, again, trying to, double up those games, put them in those district stadiums where, we can have 2 or 3 games at one time. It certainly helps getting officials there. Our biggest problem, I would say, is travel up in the north. That the game continues to grow up north, and we don't have very many officials. In fact, we've lost a couple. One guy moved back down to Denver. One guy moved from Loveland to Westminster. So, we're going to have to travel officials from Denver up to northern Colorado. So, again, we've got to get a much better push for finding officials in northern Colorado. That the same is true with the mountains. They've got a lot of ground to cover up there, and we've got actually a couple of new mountain officials, which is great. We lost a couple as well, so we're probably about net even in the mountains. So that would certainly help again to get more folks to join the ranks of the dark side and on the stripes and come and officiate. One of the other things that I'd really like for you all to emphasize with your coaches and then with their parents is just we've seen an increased, I'm not sure if hostile is the right word, but just a lot of noise coming from, the spectators, even with some of the coaches. And again, all of this off-season stuff, kind of blends into the spring. And, last year, as we had to, CHSAA had to put out a message to everybody to say, look, we've had a bunch of parents follow, officials out to the parking lot, and, we had to get escorted, and that's just not acceptable. We had an incident at the Sports Dome literally on Saturday, which to me, it's just despicable that this even happened. There was a situation where, the official was single, blew the whistle. Apparently, one of the coaches didn't hear the whistle blown. There was a shot that went down and scored, and it just devolved from there. There was a couple of flags thrown for unsportsmanlike. He was ejected, left the facility, came back into the facility. Him and the official got into it. They actually both went out in the parking lot, and they, got into a little skirmish, went down on the ground. Both of them were cited for disorderly conduct. Now the official can't, officiate for the year in the spring because he did something with his hamstring and something with his shoulder. I mean, how does it devolve to that? I just don't understand. We talked about it last night in our meeting, and I spoke with that official. I said, why in the world would you even do that? I said, how many times in our meetings have we talked about just dial 911? I mean, if someone threatens you or someone's doing something, just literally pick up your phone and say, coach, I'm calling 911, or to the parent, I'm calling 911 right now. So it is best for you to leave. His response to me was, well, I just thought it was for medical emergencies. No, it's not. I mean, we had an incident several years ago at Rock Canyon where a parent came down and actually, made physical contact with one of the officials. I think there was some citation from the Douglas County Sheriff, and CHSAA banned him from life for, any CHSAA event. So that's something that we really have to emphasize this year. It's just, again, we're all human here. We're going to make mistakes, right? We've never called a perfect game. The players have never played a perfect game, and the coaches have never, coached a perfect game. We're all going to make mistakes. I say all the time in my head, the ball never lies. There might be something that I might miss or something I should have done. And then what do you know? The ball gets turned over. It's like, great, it all worked out. There's really not one thing during a lacrosse game, that an official can do that can really impact the game. Very, very rarely. There's 1,000 things that happen, and we just need to put it in perspective. Again, I understand, we're competing here, and we're competing for a state championship, and we talk about it in our association all the time that these games are important to the players, they're important to the coaches, and they're important to the parents. And we need to go out there and hustle the whole time and do the best job and put ourselves in the right position to make the call. And again, you make a call, half the people are happy, half the people are unhappy. But following an official out to the parking lot, trying to micromanage them during the game, trying to yell out and do all these things. It's like, look, let's just relax, and let's let the kids go out there and compete, and let them do their thing. Let us do our thing. Let the coaches do their thing. And when the end of the game, we'll just walk off, and everybody's going to be better, and the sun's going to rise the next day. So that's all that I would say is, if you could please, emphasize that, because we just have to stay away from this, because that's, I think, the main reason why, we're not getting new officials. They just don't want to get yelled at. Again, they just don't want to get yelled at and get micromanaged. And, that's, I think, is the biggest thing from an impediment perspective from recruitment, is they just don't want to get yelled at anymore. And it is what it is. Me, I don't really care. I can manage the coaches. I can manage, the game. But younger people, they just don't have that capability because they don't have the experience. So, please work with us, and hopefully knock on this piece of laminate here that we're going to have a season where we don't have any of these incidents. And that would be my stretch goal. And that's it.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Scott. So you mentioned that, I just have a quick follow-up question. You mentioned that, are these behaviors happening during the official CHSAA season? You mentioned the off season. Is it all like just running together
It
year
all
round?
runs together, right? I mean, we did have what I talked about getting escorted, last year, CHSAA made that announcement, and every game, we got escorted out for probably the last couple of weeks of the season because there were a couple of incidents. Again, I would highly suggest, if you can get those school administrators, there at the field, would be helpful. And most of the time at the varsity games that happens. It's, to a lesser extent at the sub-varsity games where, things can certainly spin out of control pretty quickly. That there's usually not a school representative there because, again, it's sub-varsity, and, they're early, and, folks are busy, and there's multiple sports going on, so it's hard to get those covered. But, again, if we can find someone there to, help manage that. But I mean, part of it is, a lot of the stuff spills over from, the off season, because now lacrosse is 365, 24/7, with these kids playing, and, they develop bad habits, the officials develop bad habits. We've talked about that. It's like, I get it. You're doing 10 games in the summer. You're absolutely just wiped out, and you're being lazy, and you're walking up and down the field. It's like, we cannot have that, on the CHSAA Springfield. And it's hard for, both players and sometimes officials and even coaches to turn that dial from, the summertime where it's, recruitment, and, they're trying to get their kids into college, where we basically pretty much, unless somebody's going to lose their head, we're likely not throwing a flag, to now, we're playing on the spring field where, yeah, we're absolutely 100% going to call that. And that, I think, is part of the problem too, that, people just get into this habit of how these, games are going to get managed, how they're going to play, during the fall and the winter and the summer. And then it's just hard to, turn the switch. And then the other part is with the, the indoor box league, there's a lot of contact that is permissible there that is not permissible in the spring game. We're really talking about the cross checking and, things like that, spill over into the field game. And, we try and correct it, and it's hard. That's something that the coaches really need to, work with their, athletes during the week, because, we can't get that cleaned up, on game day. And, then it just kind of devolves from there. So I think that's just a combination of things that make for a really bad, cocktail, so to speak, where it just becomes incendiary, and then things kind of get worked up from there.
Thanks, Scott. I know that we're having almost the same conversation in many of our other sports too. So hopefully we can build some consistency across our departments. Anybody have any questions or comments on officials' reports?
Kevin, I'll add one thing, and then also want to take a second. I know Juice just joined us as well. So, Juice, if there's some items you would like to add to the update from our officials, please feel free to do so. Scott, thank you for adding that. We had and I'll cover this a little bit more when I get to my updates, but we did have our preseason coaches meeting yesterday. We talked through some issues, or not issues, we talked through some items around officials and making sure that there's certain things in place for our officials while they're at our host school. So I'll get more into details on that. But Scott, I appreciate you providing that information. One question I do have in terms of administrative support that we would like to get from you all throughout the course of the year. What would you say is the I guess the consistency from having administrators or some sort of escort to and from the playing field, but then also, to the parking lot as well, because I know that's one of the items that was discussed. So one of the things that we'd love to hear from you all throughout the course of this year is it consistently happening in terms of you getting escorts to and from the playing field, and then also from to and from the parking, or I guess not to from the parking lot, but to the parking lot after the games. The other thing too, the officials' reports is something we'll talk a little bit more about, and the importance of us getting those to be able to help address issues with coaches, student athletes, as well as spectators. So those are just some things from our end that we covered during the coaches meeting last night that we'll continue to have conversations on as well.
Yes, and we've talked about that too with our officials, how to make the report, and we talk about what level that needs to be reported. If someone gets an unsportsmanlike, if we see continued trends from a team or a player or something like that, any incidents that we learn about after the game or something like that, we will definitely get that to you. I mean, I would hope that the season goes off without any incidents, but you just never know. And with the discourse, it's just not a good thing. So we appreciate your support, and we're here to collaborate with you. Anyone on the board is more than happy to go to any of the parent meetings and talk about the rules and conduct and things like that. We've always made ourselves available, and we'll do that again. And all we truly want to do is collaborate with you, because as far as I'm concerned, that this game is about the athletes, and make sure that they have an enjoyable experience, and and they walk off the field as competitors, and and they go on to the next day without any incidents.
Hey, Scott, so I'm clear, the incident that you're talking about from last week on Sunday, did that involve a coach or a fan with the
Coach.
official?
It was the Highlands Ranch coach. It was Saturday at the Dome.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah,
And Scott, just one question for clarification for me. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but so the coach from Highlands Ranch, is that their active high school coach as
I
well?
believe it is.
Okay.
And again, this wasn't a CHSAA, sponsored event, right? I mean, this is, and again, it's so funny. Whenever I do these games, I say, fellas, we are here to knock the rust off. We are not here to sit here and kill somebody, and we're not here to be, just a bunch of idiots out here. Again, the whole idea of these, off-season things is, to keep the stick in their hand and all of that. And I just, frankly, I don't understand how it devolved to that. I mean, I think that there's fault on both parts. And, I've spoken with our officials, like, why would you put yourself in that situation? Why would you even go out there? And it's like, just call 911, pick up your phone and say, Coach, I am dialing 911 right now. You are trespassing. You are not supposed to be in the facility. He left the facility and then he came back in the facility and said, we're going out in the parking lot. And they actually threw down and went to the ground. I think it was John Columbi, who's a former New York policeman, who's, I think, the assistant coach at Castleview, and another a player and a fan had to pull these two fellows apart. I mean, that is just unacceptable on both individuals' part. And why it came to that is beyond me. It's just incredible. But again, not a CHSAA sponsored event. I just don't understand it.
Hey, Scott, can I just, have you talked to them about having escorts or parking?
I already talked
Uh,
about all that. Yep.
Okay, because down here in Miami, it's paramount. We have a place to park. Somebody meets us there. It's usually the AD or somebody involved with that, and they walk us to the field, and they're there the entire time, and then they walk us back to our cars after. And it's all over Miami. They do it everywhere, and there's also an officer or a sheriff on duty that's there on spot. So it's getting bad everywhere, Miami, Texas, Colorado, whatever, and it's just getting bad, really bad.
Can I just jump in from a I appreciate what everybody's saying from a practicality and sustainability point, that sometimes that's hard to do, to identify an escort from parking lot to the field. Of course, we want to do that. Is there any type of game reports that are sent that includes behavior of coaches or fans that we can follow up on after the fact if
Yes.
if something does
Yes.
happen?
CHSAA has a form that we fill out. It's on the website. We fill that out. It goes to Aaron. It goes to me. It goes to Guy and a couple other folks. So we all look at them. We then, debrief. A lot of times, if there's coaches that make complaints, we pull the film and look at the film and figure out what happened. If our official was in the right spot. What happened with the situation. So there's a lot of collaboration. Some coaches are better than others about sharing things like that. But again, if there's an incident involving an official where something was done or not done, let us know and send us the film and we'll have that dialogue with the official, because the whole goal from the RMLOA perspective is, again, like I mentioned, is to make sure that these athletes have an enjoyable experience, because it is all about them. And we're all human, and it's how are we going to get better, what have we done next, and again, just trying to learn from a mistake that might have been made, and let's not have that happen again.
One thing I got question for you, Scott, is, I mean, the first thing I could think is, like, I get all the added protections for the officials. It's a little appalling just hearing what you're saying, honestly. But how do we? There's probably a bigger discussion, but how do we actually correct the behavior of the fans themselves moving forward? Because it seems unacceptable that we're having to have this discussion and this concern. But for you, Scott, like, I guess question is do you believe there is a carryover between club that comes into the high school stuff? I don't know exactly how a club tournament runs. If it looks like, are there people monitoring the fans during club things? Do we need to maybe work more directly as athletic directors and club members to figure out how do we support so it looks similar?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, we will call the tournament administrator to come over. I mean, I was out in California over Martin Luther King weekend, and I had an incident on a field where the fans were just absolutely belligerent, right? And I don't engage with them. I don't say anything to them. I literally, walked across the field and had the people at the table call the tournament administrator, and came over there and dealt with the fans. So, again, that's just one thing. And, here, what we have, and I always say, as the head coach goes, so goes the rest of of the team, and that includes their, parents and spectators and things like that. And if the coach gets out of control, then the players get out of control and get chippy, and then the fans get out of control. So I mean, I think it really starts from a leadership perspective, really working with our head coaches. And I get that we're in a very competitive, environment, and this is all about, winning, and sometimes sportsmanship gets pushed to the side. But I think if we just emphasize, look in the mirror and check your behavior. And I mean, I've done this at a youth game. I would never ever do it in a high school game. But again, I've been doing this for a long time. And I literally walked over to a guy who was micromanaging me, and I stood next to him and I said, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" And he told me. I said, "Do you stand over, someone who works on your team and basically tell them, hey, you know what, that Excel formula is wrong. Geez, you missed that, you missed that, you missed that, you missed that, you missed that." It's like, that's not how this works. It's like, we're professionals, we're getting paid, cheer for your team and don't micromanage us. They just think that they know the rules better than us. I mean, I've actually, after the game, sometimes in the youth game, I've walked over and handed my card out and said, "Hey, look, we're short on officials. I'd love to have you out here. You seem to know the rules pretty well." So I think that that's really what it is, they just think that they're, entitled to just berate officials. They see it on TV, and they just think that it's acceptable behavior, and it's just not, especially at the high school level. It's like, it's just not acceptable. It's a lot better, I think, in some of the district stadiums because they're far away, but you can still hear it. I mean, I've walked over to the table and I said, "Hey, can you make an announcement, or if there's an administrator there, so can you go over there and talk to those folks? Because I'm all for cheering." I said, "I'm not all for saying some really terrible things towards some of the other players on the other team." I mean, I've done that with some students in the stands. It's like, "Look, fellas, I get it. You're excited about this, but we can't be saying that to these other players." It's like, just cheer for your team. So, we've done that. But again, I think it's just a never-ending battle to try and correct a behavior that just seems to have, permeated, how we behave now as human beings.
Maybe on that note, it's just a thought I have is, and we can explore it at some point, probably not today, but like maybe there's an idea of where as a committee we could either do it as a committee or task leagues of like, here's just the overall expectations for coaches with officials that are sort of blanket. And I'm just thinking as a game administrator, it might be helpful on that end where, especially opposing coaches when they come, and like sometimes I'll have opposing coaches that come and I'll look over and I'll be like, "What in the heck are they doing?" But it might help me direct a conversation with them of like, here's the expectations that everyone's supposed to be following, like make sure you are right now, or something along those lines. If you're kind of saying it's starting with the coaches and going, I can see that. But I don't know if you other guys experience that same thing where sometimes another coach comes onto your field and you're turning over and being like, "What is going on? Why are we acting this way?"
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. That's a great point. I mean, I think it's really just getting introspective and, getting people to think about their, behavior and their conduct.
Yeah, and again, this is not just specific to lacrosse, and we are seeing this in a lot of other places too. So I think it behooves us to work together as a CHSAA membership along with the officials, side by side with the officials, to create a more positive learning environment.
One last thing I'll add to that, and I appreciate everybody's feedback because I know it's kind of across the board in all of our sports where we've had issues with issues in terms of treatment of our officials. I know, and Chris, I know you know this too. We see it a lot in ice hockey, especially with the club ice hockey and then high school ice hockey and kind of that crossover. In a lot of our sports, I mean, really club in all of our sports, there's just kind of a different, we see the difference, and a lot of times that does carry over to our high school seasons and kind of the treatment of our officials, which is unfortunate. And we see a lot of it on social media as well. So I think as much as we're able to do to continue to communicate our expectations in terms of treatment towards our officials, I think it's going to be really important. I think the sportsmanship piece is also another part of that. So I know right now we're talking about the treatment of officials from spectators and fans, but then also from a coaching perspective and our interactions, engagements between our coaches and our officials, as well as our student athletes. Is Colette and I have seen lots of, and I'm sure you all have seen the reports that we get, that our officials submit in terms of instances with our coaches or instances with our student athletes in terms of treatment towards officials. So I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in terms of raising those expectations for our student athletes, our coaches, as well as for our spectators.
Yeah, agreed, Aaron. All right, any other comments before we move on? Scott, thanks for leading that conversation, and thanks to everybody for participating. Rod Allison, Coaches Association reports.
Okay, thanks. And listen, I'm still digesting just the last few minutes of the conversation here. And we'll do whatever we can at the Coach Association level in terms of communicating the messages that need to be communicated. But we all know that, that only goes so far. When the whistle blows and games start. Things are different for many of the reasons you all have discussed for the last 4 or 5 minutes. Scott, I know, and maybe others here are involved at the youth level in lacrosse. I am too. And frankly, I think it begins there when you want to talk about fans and parents. And, the earlier grip that you can get on families, kids, fans, parents at an earlier age. So by the time they matriculate to high school, patterns or habits or aren't as set as they are, or the entitlement of parents and fans, to behave as everybody's been talking about here. We'll certainly look into the fact that anything goes on with coach and do what we can to support that process. So now, on a more positive note and a quick report from the Coaches Association. The Colorado High School Boys Lacrosse Association works in conjunction with CHSAA, and we try to coordinate. It's a CHSAA sanctioned sport and has been for about 25 years. The Coaches Association predates CHSAA, so where it existed prior to CHSAA, and so boys lacrosse was being played for 30, 35 years prior to it being sanctioned. And that was kind of the initial formation of the Coaches Association, for just a little historical note. But obviously, our general provisions, we want to promote lacrosse as a positive model for high school students. And our association consists of the head coaches of the CHSAA sanctioned varsity programs. And we try to assist the coaches in providing information through just communication year round to all high school coaches, just really to help maintain high school lacrosse in Colorado, generally as a successful student activity. We are, the part of the discussion we were just having is the year-round nature of sports across the board, not just lacrosse. And, we got to remember that it's an educational and student experience that we're dealing with high school athletics. And there's just tremendous pressure to kind of move away from that. A quick list of some of the specific things we do that I've mentioned is we maintain an executive board that has representation from both 4A and 5A coaches. It's made up of high school coaches just to assist our process. But we do also host a preseason and postseason coach meeting. We maintain and work with CHSAA on this and sharing communication of our coaches' contact information and athletic directors that we have. We often get that information from CHSAA. So if we need to contact somebody, but we get that in the hands of all the coaches just as a contact database. We organize the Coaches Association, boys lacrosse all-state teams historically, and that leads into a big year-end function we do at the end of the lacrosse season following the CHSAA championships. We host an all-star game for both 4A and 5A. We call it the Frolicker Toll game. Frolicker and Toll were two individuals that helped bring lacrosse to Colorado 50 plus years ago, and they were some of the original roots of lacrosse in our state. At that All-Star game, we've just in the weeks earlier than that, the coaches get together and in coordination with USA Lacrosse, our national organization, we select All-American players, and we have a process for that. We select academic All-Americans, and then we have a number of awards and other honors that are kind of unique to lacrosse that have developed over that timeline that I've talked about, now approaching of 55, 60 years, to really honor coaches, participants, administrators, or supporters. Some of these awards are referred to as the Doc Stabler Award, Ken Ranta Sportsmanship Award. And, going back on our discussion that we just had with officials, the Ken Ranta Award was going to a team and a coach that represented the best of sportsmanship. And maybe it was a team that was struggling, but, nevertheless, it's tough to show up all the time when you're in that situation. And we always look for teams and try to stress, who held up their end and did well despite difficult situations. As just an example, we do a Person of the Year. We have a couple memorial awards that in honor of some past Colorado high school players that met untimely deaths early on, and we have they're kind of character based, and we do those. And we have a big award ceremony in between the 4A and 5A game at the end of the year to do that. So we spend a lot of time with that, and we try to get it done prior to Memorial Day. And historically, we've always pulled that off, except when we were interrupted by the pandemic for a year or two. And then we had the year following where we had the season D, where it extended, past into June and some things. So other than those couple of years, we've always held that year-end activity. And it's really kind of a great night that and a conclusion to the CHSAA lacrosse season, of putting just kind of a stamp of approval and celebration to the graduating seniors and upcoming players, and families are out, parents are out, and everybody can mill around. And it's a mix of kids from all the teams. And I'm talking from the 4A, the Western Slope teams, they'll come down as best they can. And they've always been pretty enthusiastic about that, and it's a good thing. So other things that we do, we historically have supported a Colorado U19 graduating seniors team that plays up at the Vail Shootout towards the end of June, towards the end of June, 1st of July. Other teams from around the country have come in over the years. And that's a wonderful thing. And one of our coaches, or one or two, three of them, and put together kids from around the state, and we try to get the best players on that team. And then generally, I help facilitate and just do communication, serve as a liaison to coaches about from coach openings or games that teams might be looking for. And I can get it out to all the coaches and help facilitate that. And the liaison piece is, we got a lot of new coaches, especially this year, both at 4A and 5A level. There seems to be a larger number than in prior years. There's always some turnover. But, questions will come up that are certainly guided and ruled by CHSAA, for instance. So let's say a transfer rule comes up, a question about an out-of-state opponent comes up. That's not stuff will handle other than just in general information or our general knowledge, but it's always best, and I'll refer those calls, those people, make sure they get a hold of Aaron at CHSAA or the proper person so they can make sure that they're on track and doing things right there. And other than that, we're a little slow at this. We've been wanting to do this for a while, and we've been chipping away at it, and hopefully we'll make more progress on it this year as we're creating kind of a high school lacrosse website. And especially in this day of so much information, we think that we can put a lot of both current and historical information that will be of use to everybody in the game, just to, again, promote the well-being of the game and benefit the kids in the sport in conjunction with CHSAA. So that's what we do. And that's my report. Any questions, just let me know.
Rod, that sounds awesome. Could you put a officials needed link on your new webpage where people can sign up to be an official?
Yeah, we could do that. And that's a good question, Kevin. And probably in future years, we could work in coordination with Scott or whoever and do so as an earlier point in as possible in time. And I mentioned the youth level. It's really got to start there. And again, Scott's involved at the youth level as well, trying to find and mentor and bring along younger officials. And we just always need a bigger number of people and effort and in doing that successfully. But sure, whatever we get up and running, stuff like that is a perfect example of anything we could do to help.
All right. Thanks, Rod. Thanks for your advocacy for the sport. Questions, comments, discussion for Rod?
Just a thought listening to Rod, maybe Scott, it's something to explore on the flip side of the positive end of things is there a way that would the Lacrosse Officials Association be thinking about maybe there's a way that officials can nominate teams that show sportsmanship for an award at the end of the year that shows like the positive light of things. I don't know.
Well, that's an interesting question. And, over the years, really until recent years, we used to hold all the preseason and postseason meetings that I mentioned. We do them in person, and we did that up to the pandemic. Even though in the years just prior to the pandemic, electronics had come around where we could do things Zoom, but we still like to get together in person. And when we would do that, one of the things that the Coach Association used to do, and it's on CHSAA's plate now, as it should be, and as they have developed management of lacrosse, is the rules update for coaches. And that takes place now through CHSAA and independent of us, but we used to facilitate that process. And I would get a hold of the president of the association or other representative from the association to come in and do the rules update. And then, it wasn't just a rules update. There was some dialogue, there was some communication, and there was officials and coaches talking preseason before the whistle blows, right? And trying to get on the same page. And so, we're always happy to coordinate and facilitate as much as possible with that. And the fact that we don't get together in person has kind of taken out some of that in-person flavor, I think. But we'd be happy to look for ways to facilitate more communication. I'll tell you this, we mentioned Person of the Year award that we do at the year-end game. There has been a year, maybe two in the past, that coaches would nominate an official as the Person of the Year. And we would honor that person. And, you know, it was kind of demonstrating, you know, bridges being built between the two groups, that they were working together, not opposite of each other. And so you know, those are just things I'd observed in my time of being involved in this. So yeah, anything along those lines of coordination between Chris, but officials and us would be something that the coach association could take a look at. Things get moving so fast. It's, you know, you got to get ahead of the game. The spring league and the spring season so short. It's just boom, 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 and then it's gone. And then, you know, here we go. Unless you're on it in all those other 10 months, it kind of gets by you.
Yeah, that's great stuff, Rod. I mean, I've got a couple of things to add to that. I agree with you that, you know, if we could get the coaches and a couple of the officials together and do those preseason meetings again, there was a lot of great dialogue that we, you know, talked about different scenarios. They got to run things by us. We got to talk, you know, and had a lot more dialogue and interaction together. I think would certainly, you know, help move the needle forward in a very positive way. You're right. In the past, we used to do the sportsmanship. We did it at 4A and 5A, where there was a survey monkey that CHSAA helped us with, and you know, we would have the officials vote of who they thought the, you know, the sports, you know, the highest level of sportsmanship demonstrated by a team, you know, in both 4 and 5A. And you know, I'd certainly welcome that back. I think another thing that would help, Rod, is if we were able to have you know, some type of messaging go out to the graduating seniors, you know, to say, hey, look, you know, if you're not playing in college, you know, there's still a way that you can stay, you know, connected to the game, you know, put on the stripes and do that. And I think that would go a long way again towards just, you know, keeping them involved in the game. And, you know, I appreciate you putting a link up on your website. Again, the more places that we can promote people to sign up to officiate, the better. So I think that that's certainly some, you know, some positive things that we could do to try and grow the game from the third team on the field perspective.
Thanks, everyone. Any other discussion topics, questions, comments?
Kevin, I just wanted to thank Rod for one, giving that update, but two, just the work that he's been doing with our coaches association. I know it's a lot of behind the scenes and a lot of work that goes into it. So Rod, we just appreciate everything that you're doing to continue to make that an impactful group.
Yeah, thank you guys.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Rod. Chess update, Aaron Dunn and Colette.
Thanks, Kevin. Just a couple updates for us on our end. I wanted to kind of just start with a quick recap of last year's postseason for our championships. And obviously, I was not here for that. So I will lean on Colette to give her thoughts on last year's postseason, as well as you all's thoughts on how things went last year from a postseason perspective and experience for our student athletes and coaches. We'll talk a little bit in terms of participant numbers or spectator numbers, and then I will kind of jump into a couple other items that I've got from a CHSAA standpoint. So Colette, wanted to see if you could share a little bit from your experience last year on our postseason and playoffs.
Yeah, we've had a great postseason. DU for the semifinals and the championships. Championships with our 5A game. We basically sold out the stadium. We had to put some people over on that grass hill, which was great. It was a great atmosphere for that game. Also just something to consider in the future about, we're kind of getting close to that point where, are we outgrowing DU? Do we need to think of other possibilities to potentially put some spectators at DU when we get to those big games that fill up the whole stadium? But again, the atmosphere was incredible. We had some great games. Overall, it was a great postseason.
And then just kind of from a numbers perspective. So last year we were down just a little bit in terms of numbers. So we were at 6,080 from our spectator standpoint. And then the year prior to, which I know was really a record setting year, which would have been 2024, we were at 6,266 in terms of spectators. So not a huge drop off. And, some of that may have to do with weather, some other things going on. But, we're hopeful that this year we'll continue to see that number grow and hopefully we can eclipse that 62, 66 number that we saw in 2024. But I think question that Colette brings up in terms of are we outgrowing our current venue? Do we need to look at some options of bringing in some additional seating potentially, or what other options are there from a spectator venue standpoint for our boys lacrosse championships? Any thoughts from our committee in terms of postseason? So what went well from your experience? Are there any areas of growth that we need to think through and really have some more discussion on either today or at a later point? And then any additional thoughts in terms of DU as our venue?
I will say with that being, with that being said, we are confirmed to host at DU for this year's semifinals and championships. So we'll still be back there for the 2026 year.
I can tell you that the coaches and the feedback I get from players and families is everybody loves going over and using DU. There are, as you've mentioned, this quote space limitations, but I've watched both DU closely on men's and women's side, and then the professional teams when they come through town. And we have the Denver Outlaws in the PLL and predating the PLL, there was the Major League Lacrosse. They would hold some playoff games there. And you're going, well, can you fit everybody in? And, there's a hillside there that can be utilized and you can kind of cram them in. And it's almost, my take is unless the numbers grow significantly of people turning out, it makes everything a premium over there. And there's just more excitement and stuff versus where, for a number of years it was down at Empower Field. And that was a unique deal and a fun deal. And kids were playing, at the big stadium. And that's when I kind of got sucked into lacrosse, frankly, was when my son was in high school. They played the first game that was ever played down at the stadium. And that's kind of when that process started. But you'd get swallowed up. There'd be a lot of people down there, but the stadium holds 75,000 or something. One year, because of some scheduling and things of that, it moved out to Dick's. And that's a terrific venue. And there it's always just and it holds what 10, 11, 12 or something, but there's cost, timing, all that kind of stuff that you guys need to work through at the CHSAA level as to really what works or doesn't work. Yeah, that's but I could tell you that we like DU is the feedback I get from the coaches.
I was at the Valor Cherry Creek game, and that was a great atmosphere. I thought it was just right. I think it's intimate enough to be really exciting, and I would suggest we stay at DU. And I'm always a proponent for getting kids on a college campus, and so that's one way to get kids on a college campus too. The students that are spectating as well. So
Yeah,
I'm not sure what the alternatives are, but I would suggest we stay at DU.
yeah, Kevin, that's the word, intimate. You really get that feeling over there. And it typically it works out when I was even referring to the professional league, that people find a way to get there.
No, that's good. That's great feedback. We appreciate that. And as Colette mentioned, we're scheduled to host again there this spring, which we're really excited about. And ultimately, we want to make sure that we've got a venue, which it sounds like DU has been, that is the absolute best for our student athletes and for our spectators. So we're excited to continue working with DU and hosting our state championships and semifinals there for boys lacrosse. So that's good.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest looking at Empower or CU Folsom Field or CSU, but is there another stadium that holds like 10,000? I don't know what that would be. I don't know if switchbacks would be an option if they would allow it. I'm not sure what the options would be for like up to 10,000 spectators.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. That's something we'll definitely have to look into. Hopefully, if we ever did get to that point, it would be because we're bringing in 10,000 spectators, which would be awesome if we can get to that point. We'll definitely have. I think there's some options out there, but I think you all hit it right on the head in terms of the intimate feel. For folks being able, it does it gives that kind of premium feel, and then also the scarcity effect as well. When folks can't get in, that's not always a bad thing. So it builds the excitement, and I think it's a great atmosphere for our student athletes and our coaches and spectators. So we'll hopefully we can keep it there as long as we can, and if we get to that point where we're at 10,000. Kevin, we'll have to sit down and figure out where we can, get into a 10,000 seat stadium, which will be good. So good stuff. All right, a couple other things I just wanted to touch base on from a CHSAA perspective. We did have our preseason coaches meeting yesterday, which I thought went well. We didn't get a ton of questions, but we may get some as folks get into the season. But we really went through a couple game management, regular season and postseason reminders for our coaches. We talked through some important dates. We also did talk about, from the official standpoint, making sure that we do have locker rooms and changing rooms for our officials that are separate from anyone else, making sure that those are stocked with water and other things to make sure our officials are hydrated. We did also talk about, having escorts for our officials to and from the playing field. We know it is challenging, to your point, Kevin, to be able to have somebody meet the officials in the parking lot and escort them back and forth from the parking lot. We do realize there's some challenges with that. But if possible, we really recommend having an escort for our officials to and from the playing field just to make sure that they're able to get there safely. We had some incidents in some of our other sports this fall in terms of parking lot confrontations. And so that's one of the reasons why we bring that up. So if at all possible, if there's administration, maybe they've got a couple extra bodies or some volunteers or things like that that could potentially help with that. We would love to see it, but we also recognize the limitations with that and the burden that puts on our administrators at our school. So we did talk through that. A couple other things. Just wanted to make sure this group has dates. As Colette mentioned, we'll be hosting at DU. So we'll do our semifinals will be May 16th. Will be our 4A and 5A semifinals. And then we will have our championships for both 4A and 5A on the 18th of May. So those are some key dates in terms of postseason. And then obviously our first contest is coming up on March 5th. And then first practice dates are February 23rd, and first scrimmage dates being February 28th. So we went over these dates with our coaches yesterday. We also talked a little bit, excuse me, about the differences between regular scrimmages and then foundation scrimmages. So we received a lot of questions just in general about the differences between those two. So we wanted to make sure that we were clear on those. Again, our programs get 2 of each, so 2 regular scrimmages and then 2 foundation scrimmages. And then kind of the biggest differences between those 2 regular scrimmages and foundations are one, the foundation scrimmages obviously come at a cost that goes to the foundation. Also, they're able to charge admission, keep score, all that kind of stuff for foundation scrimmages, whereas regular scrimmages, those things aren't allowed. So if you do all have questions or you get questions from your coaches or administrators about the differences between those 2, please feel free to reach out to us on that. See if there's anything else on here from a CHSAA standpoint. One other thing I will touch on, and I think We did talk about this a little bit earlier, just in terms of our coaches' reports and our officials' reports. So we do utilize that information. It is very important for us to get that information. I know our officials do a great job of getting that to us, and then we communicate that information to our administrators and coaches in terms of misconduct throughout the game, whether it's a coach, a player, and then also we get information in terms of if there's any issues with the game. So we'll continue to ask for that information from our officials, and then we'll continue to communicate that with our athletic directors and coaches as any incidences, come up throughout the season. So those are kind of the main things for us from a CHSAA perspective. Colette, anything else you want to add from updates?
Nothing else for me.
Good. Okay. All right. Any questions for myself or Colette on our updates?
Nope. Thanks, Aaron, and thank you, Colette. Moving on to number 7, additions to the agenda, shot clock discussion. So I raised this topic. I think New York has an official shot clock. Connecticut is looking into it, or might be piloting it in some form. I'm not sure of any other states that have adopted it or piloting it, but just something for us to keep an eye on in the coming years, I think. Um, I'm not sure if anybody else has anything to add on the topic.
Yeah, Kevin, I'm glad you brought that up. This came up during our girls lacrosse committee meeting as well. As you mentioned, the state of New York has adopted it, or they're doing a pilot program, essentially a 2-year pilot program for both boys and girls. And then New Jersey is also, I believe, looking to adopt it, I think in 27, 28. And then I think Connecticut was one of the other states as well that was looking at adopting the shot clock. So as a matter of fact, New York has put together, they've got a shot clock operator guide that they've actually implemented last year, and then I think they're building off of it from this year. So if anyone is interested in that, I can share that in the chat. But it is something that's being discussed, obviously, in those states, and I think some other states are looking at it as well for a couple different reasons. One, kind of the competitive balance. Two, speeding up the game. And so I know when we do our NFHS summer meetings, we'll get a chance to hear a little bit more. There's from the boys and girls lacrosse committees. And I know Melinda Brown, who's the athletic director at Mullen, is on the girls lacrosse rules committee. And so I know she's done a lot of work in terms of the shot clock. So we can reach out to her and get some more information. But it will be interesting to kind of see how those pilots have gone, how the application of the shot clock has been, in addition to, some best practices and things like that. And if it's something that, we in the state of Colorado need to kind of look a little bit further into.
Are those schools using the shot clock, using the clock for football in those stadium games, or is it a separate clock?
You know what, Ron, that's a great question. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe they are using a separate clock for that and not necessarily the football clock on that one. But I'll have to double check just to verify that for you.
Okay.
But that's a great question.
It is a great question.
I just Googled it, and in New York, it looks like there's a clock attached somewhere near the play clock, but I can't tell if it's separate or if it's the play clock.
Yeah, I'm looking also. I'm not sure. It's a question for later. Thanks, Ron. It's a good one.
Yeah, it's a good question, especially as we look at, potential implementation and what that looks like. Obviously, we're going through that with basketball and that shot clock and that process. So, we're familiar kind of with what that looks like.
Yeah, we'll have lots of practice by that time, right?
Oh yeah.
Well, great. I think one thing that came out of the basketball committee meeting around shot clocks was just the pace of play will increase. So I'm sure the pace of play will increase with lacrosse too, which may have some challenges for some of our officials with an increased pace of play. So just lots of ripple effects around this.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kevin. We'll obviously talk to with our officials about that and kind of what that looks like for them. But that's a great point that was brought up during basketball.
All right, anything else on shot clocks? Well, that brings us to adjournment. Before we adjourn, is there anything that we missed? All right, so I'll need two motions to adjourn the meeting. Can I get a first motion?
Motion.
Ron, and a second?
Second.
Thanks, Chris. Well, thank you everyone for making time today, and we'll present this committee report with no major changes to Legislative Council in April. Thanks again for making the time today.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you joining us.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Aaron. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, Rod, thank you for helping us get lacrosse off the ground at North High School 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah. And, I'm a DPS guy. So trying to, more and more kids are playing over there at the youth level